Hi, I'm Jean-Paul. I'm a recovering addict, alcoholic addict. I came into recovery at the beginning of this year, and that really began for me a journey of self-discovery and recovery, and ended what was a 20-year period of active addiction. I think there's many kinds of addicts and alcoholics, and people all have a different journey through their problems. And I'll just give you a little bit of where it all started for me. Ever since I can remember, as a young lad, I always felt that I had a sense of perhaps an inner void, something that was something that didn't feel right within me, and I could never put my finger on it. I was always I can always remember being very conscious of what other people thought about me. I was always, I didn't have a bad childhood. I think it's important to say that. I had two very loving parents. I was an only child, and I had really what can only be described as a good childhood. But whatever it was, I felt I was a very sensitive child, and through a couple of things that happened, normal traumas for any child, they had quite a big impact on me, and left some psychological scars. And these traumas, I can't even remember what they were, to be honest with you, but there's certain things that happened that stayed with me, went into my psyche, went into my subconscious, however it works. I'm not, a psychologist. I just know my own story. And really, as I grew older, this sense of inner void and separation from what I now understand to be my sense of spirituality really left me feeling unhappy and lost. I always remember as a young teenager feeling very lost, and again very sense of shame and guilt was with me quite a lot in those early years. And you could probably argue that that's the case for most teenagers as they come of age, as they get older. It's always it's particularly a tough time as you're very hormonal and so on. But as I say, I can only describe feeling a bit different, finding it hard to fit in, always acting up, acting out, to try and to be in with the cool gang, to fit in with the crowd. And so it was a no-brainer, really. It didn't take much. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to understand that when I was quite young, 13, 14, when I was introduced to alcohol and recreational drugs, it didn't take long before they really sort of ingrained themselves into my makeup. For the first time, these substances that were mind-altering, both alcohol and recreational drugs, invoked within me a sense of, well, for the first time, a sense of calm and a sense of belonging, because it was against the law. It was cool. It was what the cool kids were doing. It was kind of like, it was outside of school. It was all covert. There was a lot of sort of attraction to it, and of course it brought me together with certain people, certain individuals, and certain people within my childhood that then it gave me a real sense of belonging, and that for the first time, that sense of inner void and lostness within myself went away. So really it all started there. I mean, of course I wasn't I wasn't an alcoholic as soon as I started drinking at the age of 13 or 14, but like anyone, I was rather than really enjoying it, I didn't enjoy it at all. My body reacted quite violently to myself putting a toxin in. And my body rejected it. I was always sick, and I was always, but I kept, like any good alcoholic, I kept ploughing on and kept pushing myself forward. Until I can remember, really, by the age of 16, I was, pretty much drinking every day. And I grew up in, it was an Irish Catholic, well, I'm half Irish, half French, and I went to a Catholic boys' school, and it was a big drinking culture. But I would argue that anywhere in England, really, or the whole of the UK, is pretty much a big drinking culture. And so it wasn't difficult that, although I was a heavy drinker at a fairly early age, it was well accepted, not just within my family, but within society, within the culture that I was living and brought up in. So it was, one can really hide their addictions, particularly to alcohol, within that sort of a culture. And so by the time I was 18, a young lad who enjoyed a drink really wasn't a big issue, and it certainly wasn't something that would have been flagged up as a big problem. But I can remember, probably as early as I was in my early 20s when I probably thought to myself that I may have a problem with predominantly alcohol. Other substances were always there in the background. I always experimented with recreational drugs, but alcohol was always the thing that I'd fall back on. I went through phases of taking different drugs, but most of those sort of things were phases, and they all had their time, and I'd move on to other things. And but through the whole period of 20 years of active addiction, alcohol was the predominant force that would always, I guess I thought at the time was my friend, was my crutch, was my coping mechanism. In effect, I was able to give up any substance that was causing me problems as long as I had alcohol to fall back on. And again, that was compounded by the fact that alcohol was acceptable, within the culture I was living in. And still live in. There's a pub on every corner. By and large, it's expected of you to drink alcohol and to, to work hard, to play hard. These are the kind of precepts that people live by. So, it's easy to hide behind that. But if within yourself you know that there's some sort of a problem, as I did from an early age, really it's a question of how soon, how quickly do you do something about it? How long do you go playing along with the lie, so to speak? I was probably in my mid-20s when I first started trying to, sort of look at my alcohol and substance abuse. Start trying to work out ways of controlling, stopping, manipulating, and these were the years where I found that that such a thing wasn't possible. And I went through every combination of trying to only drink 3 days a week, 4 days a week, never on a Monday or a Tuesday, only on a Thursday, Friday. What always happened was that the whole week would mould into one long bender, and those periods would just get longer and longer and longer. I think it's important to say that I would class myself as a functioning addict. I always held down jobs. I always considered myself a hard worker. conscientious person, someone that you know, could be relied upon. But I was a good liar. I was very dishonest, and I was able to hide things very well, from not only from my family, but my employers, and even to a certain extent my friends. You know, I'd hide just how serious my problem was from all of those people. I worked for the most part of my working life up to now in catering, and you know, anyone that knows the catering industry knows that that's you know, well, it's catering. There's a lot of alcohol, and drink is very readily available within that industry, and it's very much expected. There's a real kind of work hard, play hard ethic in that industry, whereby at the end of a busy shift, most people go on and go out to a nightclub or wherever, and I had that. I lived like that for many years, and I guess my body could cope with it. You know, when I was a younger man, I was able to sort of, you know, work through the hangovers and just kind of pick myself up and just sort of, you know, really push myself on. But you know, it didn't take long before the cracks started to appear, and it was really sort of in my late 20s then I started to really experience some problems. You know, I could talk for quite a long time about all the problems I've had, you know, through alcohol and drug abuse. You know, I've lost my driving license twice. You know, I've spent countless nights in police cells. I've done a long list of, you know, stupid things, and as I say, I could go on a long time about that. But I think it's important to note that when someone is completely consumed by an addiction, really, it's not them that's acting out, it's the addiction that's acting through them. And I don't use that as an excuse. I count myself as very lucky. I mean, I know a lot of people that have suffered a lot worse than myself, that, you know, that have been sent to prison, that have done really horrendous things through their addictions, and you know, I count myself lucky. I mean, I had a 20-year period. I was a functioning alcohol and drug abuser, and you know, things got bad enough for me, and I think everybody's journey, everybody's story is different. It just depends how far you want to go down, you know, the wrong rabbit hole, so to speak. You know, I just, the turning point really came for me. I mean, I've always been a spiritual person. As I mentioned, I went to a Catholic boys' school. When I first got actually there was priests there, and you know, we were given the cane and stuff like that. I mean, sort of showing my age a little bit now, but one of the things I learnt through that religion was that I learnt about a sort of a dualistic concept of a God, kind of a God that's in a cloud somewhere looking down on us and judging us, and if I do bad things or live a bad life, I get sent to hell, and if I'm good and try and live a productive life, I go to heaven. Now, you know, you know, that's fine. I mean, I used to go to confession. I used to do bad things, and I'd go to confession, and I'd get absolved, and I'd walk out of there fresh, clean man, and I could, you know, go off and do all the bad things again, and then just have to go to confession again. So it seems that there's something flawed in that, and what I've come to realise, the thing that I've found to be flawed is this concept of God or a higher power being outside of myself. What I now see, you know, through my recovery is a sense of spirituality, a sense of oneness, a sense of that within each of us is you know, a divinity, and that we're all connected through this, you know, divine life force. You know, science can explain many things, and it can explain genetically why, you know, I've got blue eyes, and, you know, why I'm bald, and you know, all these kinds of things, but science can't explain why a baby's heart starts to beat in the mother's womb a few weeks after conception. It can't explain what forces a plant to come up through the earth. You know, this life force, you know, that we all share, all 7 billion people on the planet, you know, is an amazing thing. And it's in my recovery that I try to connect to this sense of oneness, this connection between us all. You know, I don't, I think we're all very special people, and also none of us special at the same time, in the sense that we're all equal. And that's what my recovery has taught me. And I try to, you know, not see, try to see the good in everything. I try to see the blessings all around me, and I think they are there. You just need to look, you know, and if you can't see them, look a little bit harder, you know. It's, but all I know is that when I was in my addiction, when I was drinking, you know, every day of my life, heavily, I was moving further and further away from, you know, what I now see as my higher power, my source, my inner self. And that inner void that I spoke about in the beginning, rather than being filled, was actually getting bigger. You know, of course, the drugs and the alcohol would numb the pain, and would momentarily, for a short period of time, fill the void. It was an illusion, and I understand it to be an illusion now. I think any sort of drug or alcohol use is really an illusion. It's a seeking outside of yourself for something that you can never really attain. And I understand as well that the only way that I can fill that void now is by doing the right thing in my life, by moving towards, you know, by moving onto my spiritual path, by, if you like, breaking down my ego and my lower self, not living out of fear, not living in that fear of that constant worry of what people think, of not when am I going to get my next trick, how am I going to cope in this situation, what's going to happen, constantly projecting into the future or worrying about the past. I now, you know, the great sort of understanding I have is that I don't need to do that anymore. You know, I can actually live a much more, you know, calm and serene and productive lifestyle that, you know, does actually fill the inner void, you know, does actually make me feel whole and connected. And it's through that connection that I work on every day. It's not, I'm not perfect, I'm not the Dalai Lama, I'm not the next, you know, second coming of Gandhi or anything like that. I'm just JP, and I just work on myself day by day, each day in every way, getting better and better. And it's a work in progress, progress, not perfection. But certainly if I look at my life now compared to 20 years ago, it's in a much better state, and personally I'm a much more productive and positive and happy person, which I think is very important. So really it just boils down to two things, you know, do I want to live in fear, or do I want to live with love and compassion in my heart? And the no-brainer, the easy answer for me now is to say love and compassion. You know, this is how I live my life. All those other things, my addictions are still there. They're still there within my psyche, but I just don't give them the time of day anymore that I used to. And that really is what it's all about for me.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Satsangat Ji, welcome to another episode of Alcohol and Beyond. And as you already know, our guest today is John Paul, JP as he likes to be called. Very good share from John, and a very honest account of his addiction years. JP, you talked of the inner void in your early part of your testimony. Just talk us through why that left you so empty inside.
I think it's always hard to explain an inner void. You know, it's always like it's something that's not tangible. You know, it's like it's a bit like addiction itself. You know, it's not like you can go to a doctor and say, you know, like an appendix. You know, pull this, do an operation on me and take that appendix out and you know, sort me out. You know, addiction, inner void is a kind of a, it's like bad eyesight. If you've got it, you've got it. And it's only through a working of your inner, internal self and spiritual muscles can you fill that inner void. It's an internal job. I think the point I'm trying to make is that in the material world, you know, there's no real solution to that inner void. It's only through doing the work internally that you come to become a, you know, a stronger person, and you get to really, it's the battleground, if you like, to fighting your, you know, your mental problems, whether they be depression or addiction, whatever the addiction is, whether it's a substance abuse, you know, addiction to power, money, sex, all these things that are rooted in the material world. And these things that I'm talking about are really born out of the lower self and the ego, and they're rooted in the mind. So it's only through this kind of internal work can we actually, you know, fill that void.
I mean, the ego is a big offender, and you know, the ego prevents a lot of the sunlight going to your heart. And how did you suffer with the ego?
Definitely I did. You know, I mean, for me, I got very caught up into that materialistic world, and so you know, my ego was the main player. You know, for me. The ego takes many shapes and forms, as I'm sure you're aware, and for me, I mean, I was a different person in many different situations. I could be in the pub 1 minute with certain friends, talking a certain way, and then be at work talking to clients and people, and so whilst I was living out these different egos in different situations, I was never really my true self. And so the more I was doing that, more I was acting out in that way, living in that material world, always very conscious of what people thought about me, how I looked, what sort of car I have, how much money I have in the bank, all that very materialistic things. I understand that now as my ego really driving me. And also, I think it's fair to say my addiction took over me. I mean, my thinking was born out of very selfish and self-seeking ways, which I believe is the ego, and led me into doing some very, you know, sort of bad things and negative things. So really that kind of, you know, the lower self is the ego, and now I'm trying to live more into the higher self, my higher self, connecting to my, you know, my inner self, and being more compassionate to myself and to others.
Yeah, you talk about traumas and the separation, the early traumas you had. Do you feel that they played a big part in you? Because you, as a child, you didn't feel any rejection from your parents or felt abandoned by your parents.
No.
Some of us do. But you know, you obviously experienced some strong traumas in your life that caused you to perhaps turn to the alcohol to cushion some of that pain.
Yeah, I think there was cracks. There was cracks in the makeup. Whether I was very sensitive, so it didn't take a lot. You know, it could be something as little as, you know, a kid goes and does his nativity play, falls on stage, and the crowd laughs. You know, one child will get up from that trauma and kind of go and laugh it off and laugh with the audience, and it'll be all fine. Another kid, probably like I would have at that age, that would have been a terrible thing for me. So I can't quite put my finger on it. I just know that I always had a very strong sense of shame and guilt. I had a really strong, you know, my parents were great. They were very loving. I really can't, you know, I'd love to sort of say, right, it's you, it's your fault, you know, but I can't do that. I can only say that, and I think with addiction, you know, that certain people are predisposed, genetically predisposed, to being more likely to become an addict in their adult years, and I think I would probably fall in that category. The traumas I talk about were probably, you know, it was probably just being shown up at school in front of my peers, being shouted at by a teacher.
You just found that hard to
Yeah.
move on from, or hard to accept?
I think they got rooted in my subconscious, and I think they then, rather than me dealing with them in a normal way, I turned to drugs and alcohol to hide that shame, that pain, that constant feeling of feeling separated from everybody, not fitting in. All these sorts of things were really kind of prevalent for me.
But I mean, as you were growing up, sticking around with, were you hanging around with kids predominantly older than you, or sort of similar age? Did you have much peer pressure?
There was peer pressure, yeah. I always felt a need to fit in. I did hang around with some older kids, and you know, I probably, again, my ego took over. I became someone that I was not, you know. Whereas actually, truthfully, I was quite a studious, you know, kind-hearted young boy, really. But you know, through falling in with the sort of wrong crowd and acting out in the wrong way, I ended up taking a different path.
Yeah.
And it's only really now, in the last couple of years, that I've really, you know, really trying to, through my recovery, coming back to that essence of who I truly am.
Yeah.
And trying to put the ego, you know,
to one side,
if you like, yeah.
But you started drinking at 13, you said. 13.
First experiences with alcohol were really young, you know. I mean, it could have even been 11. I mean, I remember raiding the drinks cabinet with a friend of mine, and we went through the whole
at home.
At home, and I think my father just had to put me in the bath because I was being sick so much. You know, the toilet was filling up, so he just put me in the bath, and the room was spinning, and it's what I alluded to. I mean, it wasn't really much fun. You know, alcohol wasn't really much fun in the beginning. You know, so it seems to me this is the insanity that you have with addiction. You know, yeah, anyway, you know, you put a poison into your body reacts and causes you to be sick, you know, so to get it out.
Yeah.
Why we all go on to then, you know, to push through that it seems crazy.
Especially when you had such a bad experience.
Yeah, yeah. I pushed through all that, but that was then the peer pressure. That was I wanted to be able to drink more than my friends. That was my ego. I wanted to look cool. You know, again, my ego. I was in a culture whereby it was very acceptable to drink. In fact, if you didn't drink, there was something wrong with you. And even now, you know, if I say to someone, or if a heroin addict says that they've stopped taking heroin, they'll probably be congratulated. You know, oh, well done. You know, that's a terrible affliction. You know, heroin addiction. But if I say to someone I've stopped drinking, they'll go, oh, what's wrong with you? You know,
why have you stopped drinking?
Yeah, why have you stopped drinking? What's wrong with you? Okay, and really, I'm thinking, well, actually, I'm fine because I'm drinking water. You know, I feel quite happy. You know, who's really got the problem here? You're the one drinking. You know, it's that kind of.
But I mean, from the age of 16, when you actually started drinking quite regular, right? It took you sort of early 20s to realise, hang on, there's a bit of a problem here.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I was sort of. I realised that I think it was the understanding, the realisation that I wasn't able to temper my drinking. I wasn't able to, you know, flit in and out of. You know, I was just a heavy drinker. But because I was quite a young guy, because most of my friends were drinking heavily, and I'm in a culture whereby it says, okay, well, you know, you're a heavy drinker, that's fine, as long as you work hard and play hard, it was acceptable. So I hid. You know, like any addiction, you know, the addiction had me becoming very dishonest, and I was hiding behind many things, including my job, to pretend that I didn't have a problem.
Quite interesting, really, because you described yourself as a functioning alcoholic.
Yeah.
And you think going to work helped you disguise that?
That's right. I mean, I worked in an industry where catering, as I've said, where I wouldn't say drinking is acceptable. But in the early days of when I got into that industry, you could drink at work. You know, if you were clever about it, you could almost drink at work. You know, and I think
you do that?
well, I did. Yeah, I did drink at work. You know, and it was my fuel. You know, it was how I'd cope with situations. It was what gave me energy. You know, but as I've come to realise, it's the wrong kind of energy. You know, it's like putting the wrong petrol in your car. You know, it doesn't work. You know.
No, but when was it that you first sought help? Did you go and see a doctor? Or did you go to a fellowship, AA?
The interesting thing, in my 20s, when I went to a doctor about the potential of a problem, I just didn't find the help that I needed. I was normally told to drink less, was the usual response by the doctor. Now, I've got nothing against the medical profession, but I just think that addiction is a really misunderstood disease. I think it's a really misunderstood problem, and I think that it's much more deep-rooted, certainly for me anyway, to just drink less. You know,
It's not the answer, is it?
Well, no. And I mean, listen, I tried every method possible to drink less, you know.
Yeah.
Drinking on the uncertain days, only a few days a week, drinking less, you know, I'll only go to the pub and have 2 or 3 pints. As soon as I had 2 or 3 pints, I'd want a fourth, and then a fifth, and then a sixth, until I would be, obliterated. And that would happen far too often. The only you know, I describe myself as a functioning alcoholic because I did function for a long time. And I think it's important to note that there's all kinds of different alcoholics or alcohol abusers, addicts, whatever you want to call them. We're all on different paths, we're all on different journeys. But alcohol itself will never change. Alcohol will do what it always does. It's you, the person, that your relationship with the alcohol that can only change. And yeah, I was a functioning alcoholic, but I was nowhere near living my full potential. I would always describe myself as living in like a 40 or 50% existence, if you like. You know, I was never reaching my full potential. And in the end, deep down, you know, I think we all have an inner self, a soul. And your soul is your intuition, your guidance. And there was something always nudging me, saying, JP, this isn't right, this is not right, what you're doing is not right, you're not living your life to your full potential. And that was in my mid-20s that I really started to feel that, late 20s. But it took me until the beginning, you know, I'm going to be 37 next week, you know, so really from 16 to 36, I've had 20 years of really kind of heavy...
Drinking.
Heavy drinking and addiction.
Abuse of the body as well.
And abuse of the body. And so I could count myself lucky. You know, I know there's a lot of people there that are a lot worse off, that get the bottom, the bottom of the barrel for them is, you know, hospitalisation, prison. You know, the list is endless, as you know. I just, you know, my story is my story. You know, I was functioning.
You know, in your 20s. Were your parents aware of you drinking too much, or had you moved? You weren't living at home?
I mean, my parents, you know, sort of lived separated when I was quite young, when I was 17, and I think in my mid-20s they were both, or my dad was living in France, my mum was in the south of England, so they weren't near me, so it was very easy for me to, the odd phone call just to, you know, keep things at bay. But they're not stupid, you know, and now that I've sort of made my amends to my parents, they're aware that, you know, things weren't right when I was younger, and I certainly wasn't, I didn't give myself the best account of myself to them as I should have done. I have great respect for my parents now, and I really want to do the best I can, you know, for myself, but also for them.
Yeah, I mean, recovery is very important to you now, I know it is, but what do you do on a daily basis now to maintain your recovery?
Well, recovery is essential. Recovery is sort of like, you know, the main thing for me to progress and improve my life. And recovery for me is not just not drinking or taking drugs. You know, it's a lot more than that. You know, it's a daily practice of self-improvement, self-knowledge, and you know, actualization. My goal now is to, as I said before, as a functioning alcoholic, I was only living to 50% of my potential. After I'm not, you know, less than a year of recovery, I'm maybe at 60%, you know, so, you know, still another 40%, and I hope, you know, I could get run over by a bus tomorrow, or I could live until 90 or 100. But the biggest fear for me, Jazz, is really getting to the end of my days, my deathbed, whenever that is, and saying that, you know, I let this addiction, I let this fear beat me, and I've not really lived my life. I've let that get the better of me, and I've just kind of got through my life completely not doing anything that I wanted to do, letting the addiction completely control me. So my recovery is about, firstly, not drinking, but it's also about getting to that stage and be able to look back and go, look, I've really made a big effort to do the best I can for myself and therefore for humanity as a whole, you know.
I know you're studying now as well.
Yeah, I mean, a lot's changed this year. I sort of, I'm studying at the University of Derby, a master's degree, which is something I could never have done, you know, prior to this year. And I'm thinking about next year progressing my studies further and going into psychotherapy and things like that, because I really have a big interest in addiction and trying to help people overcome their addictions.
And you're working on a book as well?
Yeah, I've finished the writing. I'm in the editing process. I'm writing a book that is really about the link between spirituality and addiction.
Yeah.
I think if, you know, any addiction, three main elements: mental, physical and spiritual, but really the spiritual side is the most important side, and by working these spiritual tools that we learn in recovery is really the best way to get a good foundation of recovery and progression in your life.
And this is only possible because you're in recovery and you've
Oh,
you know,
absolutely.
put the drink down and picked up recovery.
Exactly right. You know, if I didn't, you know, that's where it all begins. Just not having that first drink. If I do that, you know,
Yeah.
all bets are off. I may
You
as well
can
forget
succeed with
everything.
can't you?
Yeah.
Well, JP, thanks a lot for coming
Thank
on to the show for us and being so honest and sharing your journey with us.
You're welcome.
Sarsingaji, I'm afraid that's all we have time for today, but please keep those phone calls coming in, and just like JP is fulfilling a lot of his potential now, you too can. If you're struggling, have a problem with alcohol or any other drug, when we can help you, just contact the Sikh channel. You can ring us, email us, and we'll try and signpost you to whichever service that you need. So please keep them phone calls coming in. And more importantly, if you want to come and share your story with us, then please do not hesitate to contact us. And you can also join us here on the Sikh channel with your journey and how you've coped through addiction. So Sarsingaji, till next week, Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.